Recently, I did an episode on the film Incheon, which is considered by many to be the worst war movie ever made, and after days of researching the Korean War, I felt a sudden urge to watch a bunch of war movies. And in that episode, I mentioned having a particular disdain for the film Pearl Harbor, because when I watched that as a kid, I remember thinking, how the hell did anyone think that was a good idea? And yet, funnily enough, it was also my earliest memory of watching a film that I considered to be so bad that it was actually entertaining. So in terms of my upbringing, Pearl Harbor might have been the original delightfully devilish movie.
Ho 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 ho, delightfully devilish, Seymour.
Yes, everybody, welcome back to Delightfully Devilish, the show where we talk about films that all at once meet the criteria of being the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm your host, Jukebox Harry, and today we are going to take a look at the one film to ever be nominated for the Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Picture, and also win an Academy Award. In the 9 years between when I originally watched Pearl Harbor and watched it for this episode, I have seen every single Michael Bay film, and I've got to say, after knowing his style inside and out, I am a fan of his. I didn't love 13 Hours, Pain and Gain sucked, and Transformers 1, 2, and 5 were all shithouse. But the rest of his films I really enjoyed. And yet Pearl Harbor always stood out for me as the black mark of his career, so after 9 years and a whole lot of growth, I decided to go back and see if I could feel that experience all over again. Pearl Harbor starts with the most conventionally irrelevant intro ever. The two protagonists of the film are seen as flyboy children on a country farm who get a little too excited and accidentally go for a short journey in Popper's crop duster. They land safely, but Popper's not impressed. He starts disciplining his child in a fairly appropriate manner, giving the stunt he pulled. But the other kid isn't too happy with that. After panting furiously, he comes and beats the kid's father with a 2x4.
I will bust you open, you dirty German!
I fought the Germans in France. And I fought them in the trenches. And I pray to God no one ever has to see the things that I saw.
Geez, the film just made a ridiculous shift from tediously melodramatic to ridiculously sentimental just like that. And then Daddy just walks away.
You're my best friend. Daddy, wait!
His son runs after him, and then apparently everything is perfect and forgiven. This is Michael Bay's idea of characterization. It's the only scene from the film that actually gives us any understanding as to the historical relationship between the two main characters, and it also titillates you into thinking there might be a father-son element to the story, which there isn't. Now this whole scene is so irrelevant that the film just cuts to the modern day of the story, where suddenly the main characters, Rafe and Danny, are pilots. And just listen to the dialogue in this scene.
I guess I'll go right. No, left. I'll go left. Okay, we're going left, right? Right. Right like we're going right or right like we're going left?
Well, now you got me all mixed up. I don't know. Make up your mind.
Everything that's happening in this scene will give you a perfect expectation of what's coming from the film. A lot of ridiculous dialogue against the backdrop of some pretty awesome aviation. And just so you know, the first hour and 22 minutes of this film are completely irrelevant to anything to do with Pearl Harbor, so I'm going to try as hard as I can to condense everything down to a few minutes and maybe just highlight the cringiest points.
Oh, it's such a long story.
After showing that they're careless pilots, Rafe and Danny get told off by Alec Baldwin, but Rafe talks his way out of it.
I was doing it to try to inspire the men, sir. In the way that you've inspired me.
That's bullshit, Macaulay. But it's very, very good bullshit.
Thank you, sir.
That line right there, that perfectly describes this film. It is very good bullshit. We see some women talking on a train, and one of them is Ben Affleck's future wife. And Evelyn, the female lead, tells everyone a story about how she became part of one of the most pretentious love stories ever. It starts with Rafe terrified about getting his wings taken away.
I'm gonna take my wings away.
He fails the eye test as a dyslexic, but for the second time in the film, he uses emotional manipulation to get his way.
Ma'am, please, don't take my wings.
Did you see that jerk?
That line right there, that marks a landmark period in my childhood because I had never cringed at a line of dialogue in any film as much as I did when Ben Affleck said, "Please don't take my wings away." That line is unforgettable for me. I really hope I can actually quote that line one day in a relevant context because that would be quite an achievement. This marks the start of a romance you're never gonna forget for all the wrong reasons. It's a soap opera melodrama which starts with Evelyn letting someone enlist that she really shouldn't be, then injecting him with shots he already got which causes him to faint and then break his nose. Later on, a champagne bottle goes off and corks his nose.
You are so beautiful, it hurts.
It's your nose that hurts.
Oh wow, you really are a nurse.
And then I kissed him.
Evelyn, it's the most romantic story I ever heard.
You must have a really shitty love life then. But don't worry, Jennifer Garner, you'll get your chance. You'll get to marry Ben Affleck for about 13 years before he divorces you and then starts dating the hologram from Blade Runner 2049.
True story.
It's been the most romantic 4 weeks and 2 days of my life.
What a specific unit of time to use as measurement for romance. Who previously held that record?
One day we'll take a trip on a boat like that.
Did you like that?
Well, given that this film is a 3-hour love story set against the backdrop of a historical tragedy, you are on a boat like that. It's called the Titanic.
Well, you got no secrets from me, Lieutenant. I've seen your medical chart. This isn't your chart.
No you haven't, darling. Evelyn learns that her flyboy is transferring to England to fight in the Battle of Britain.
Not anxious to die, sir. Just anxious to matter.
I'd be tempted to make a game where you take a shot every time someone says a cringeworthy line in this film, but if I did that, you'd be dead from alcohol poisoning before the first hour of the movie was over. John Voight wheels on in, playing Franklin Delano Roosevelt, with the makeup department having given him a big-ass bald chin. The line on the fake chin is really obvious in this lighting, and I think the editors noticed it too because they try to hide it by cropping this next shot. The whole scene is just obligatory politics, it's very arbitrary. And then we learn that the entire reason that the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor is because Mako is pissed off that the Americans stopped exporting oil to Japan. The film literally condenses all the reasoning behind the attack on Pearl Harbor to a few oversimplified sentences which treats the Japanese as greedy capitalists. I really should not be surprised that Michael Bay is approaching politics with one-sided writing and shameless American jingoism, but yet I still am.
This is so exciting.
No, it isn't. We still have 47 minutes of love story to burn through.
If there are many more back home like you, God help anyone who goes to war with America.
America! Fuck yeah!
More Japanese footage, still no attack. But one of the actors is Shang Tsung from Mortal Kombat. The first decent moment happens 40 minutes in when Rafe goes to fight in the Battle of Britain, and we get some incredible visual effects and exciting footage of actual aviation. Unfortunately, the battle is over as quickly as it starts because Rafe ends up getting shot down and presumed dead. The film really wants you to believe that Rafe has died, and it's a very emotionally manipulative tactic, but it doesn't work. First of all, Ben Affleck is the headliner of this film. He is not going to die before the film's title actually becomes relevant to the plot. Second of all, look how the scene plays out. There's a clear rule in films that if a character's death isn't seen on screen, then they're still alive. I'll let you be the judge of what's going to come later. Then we cut right back to shitty character drama.
Tell me now, could you be any more boring?
Nope, you really couldn't. A random boxing match because masculinity. Though I do like Cuba Gooding Jr.'s small part in the film. Evelyn is greeted by the news that Rafe has been shot down, and yet rather than having a powerful scene where she is confronted by this news, Pearl Harbor plays out like a silent movie and then cuts right before any actual acting would be needed. As a war film, Pearl Harbor should really put some degree of emphasis on the brotherhood shared between Rafe and Danny as best friends, but it just doesn't. There's no dramatic grounding, so when he supposedly dies, and Danny is confronted with that news, we're not left to feel anything. More Japanese drama, no attack. The best thing you can do when watching a film called Pearl Harbor is stop expecting them to actually bomb Pearl Harbor. Michael Bay could claim that he's trying to use the element of surprise to keep audiences on their toes, but really, he just doesn't know how to build a narrative all that well. Rather than challenging his actors to actually show any grief, we instead cut to 3 months later, and then suddenly Evelyn and Danny decide to spontaneously start dating. And then banging.
My heart is pounding.
Oh, that ain't your heart, Danny.
Telling me if you were dead and you saw your best buddy doing your girl, you wouldn't come back and beat the living crap out of him?
Tony, back off.
I'd be back so fast.
Danny's been a better friend taking care of her himself.
I got a girlfriend.
That's great.
You fly boys, you crack me up.
Some lines of dialogue in this film are so ridiculous and out of place that they're fucking hilarious, and that is one of them. More Japanese footage, still no attacks. The romantic drama in the film is so cringeworthy that every time you get teased that they're actually going to make the attack and it doesn't come and you go back to more cringeworthy romantic drama, it's just worse. And unfortunately, the closer we get to the attack, the hilarity of the cringeworthy romantic drama starts to wear off and it just kind of becomes boring. You have to sit through 80 minutes of it. That's an entire film in itself. At some point, you're going to be like, alright, can the Japanese finally fucking bomb America? But no, it just keeps flipping back and forth, again and again, round and round, over and under, around and around, round and about, over the meadow, through the woods.
How long is this going to take?
Then the revelation comes that Rafe has survived.
I did not see that coming!
He just happens to come back to his girlfriend, having struck up a relationship with his best friend. And it's the night before the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Well, that sucks.
Rafe, you died. So did I.
No, you didn't.
I don't know where I am.
You're in Oahu.
Have you suffered a recent blow to the head?
And just watch Ben Affleck's reaction to an actual moment of attempted drama in the film. I don't know whether he shit himself or he suddenly remembered where he left his lost retainer in the 2nd grade. It quickly becomes difficult to sympathize with Rafe because he's written to be so one-dimensional that he just becomes a toxic masculine presence in the story.
And we thought that you were dead. I almost did die, you little son of a bitch. Her face was the last thing that went through my mind.
Well, if you didn't die, then that wasn't the last thought that went through your head, fuckwit. He went to England as a likable character and came back as an asshole. But luckily enough...
Finally, about damn time.
Your wait for the attack has been like...
It's been 84 years.
Then the film takes an astonishing turn. It all starts with a Japanese montage of blue filters. The The next 40 minutes show you some of the greatest action in the history of war movies. It's impossible to condense everything brilliant about what comes next into just a few sentences, but the actual attack and battle at Pearl Harbor is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in a movie. In between the amazing spectacle, there's a couple of odd things happening, starting with this guy's sentence getting cut off, even though he totally had time to finish that word, and the pilots drinking before they go flying. But the entire scene is thrilling, and there's all kinds of moments exploring tragedy and excitement.
Kid, don't get penisy!
Amid the chaos, the protagonists drive to a remote airfield with a journalist.
I wouldn't say any newsreel, and I can tell you one thing. Them ain't Navy planes.
I don't think it's particularly hard to know that those aren't going to be Navy planes, but also, you're talking to pilots, dickhead. They make it to an airfield where Tom Sizemore is angrily firing his shotgun at enemy planes like a hick.
I started blasting. Bang! Bang! Oh, I don't see so good, so I missed.
I honestly love that image so much.
Don't freeze.
I never freeze.
As the pilots start charging towards their planes in the crossfire of the Japanese, the journalist joins them for some reason.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
The character is an idiot. He has no reason to be inside the danger zone, so when he dies as a result of his own stupidity and carelessness, there's nothing to feel. This turns into a thoroughly exciting dogfight, which just adds to the brilliant action in the film. And after an extended battle sequence, the action all ends at the 2-hour mark, and you're going to be left truly exhilarated by it all.
今回の攻撃は眠れる巨人を叩き起こし、怒らせた可能性もあるな。
You had all the time in the world to plan this attack and you're only going to say it now? Jesus Christ. The film tries to continue being intense by showing the continued tragedy and suffering going on in the hospitals, and even though this is pretty noble, it's also very jarring because of the excessive use of filters and Gaussian blur. Shots of the tragedy continue to linger for a while, though there's some really cliche moments of imagery, and some sponsored content by Coca-Cola. You can't have a Michael Bay film without product placement, even if the story is set in 1941. President FDR talks everyone into attacking Japan immediately by revealing that he can walk.
Do not tell me it can't be done.
Oh, that was such a cheap shot.
Hey, look at me. I'm walking. Oh, I'm a remarkable man.
I like sub-commanders. They don't have time for bullshit.
Then a sub-commander probably should have directed this film, because there's way too much bullshit in this 3-hour saga. Then we're back to the soap opera.
Evelyn, loving you kept me alive.
I thought the French people who rescued you did.
I should have died over there.
Yes, you should have. It would have shortened this film considerably.
But I just want to know why. Just tell me that, will you please? Just tell me why.
Ain't nothing but a heartache.
Tell me why.
Ain't nothing but a mistake.
Now number 5.
Rafe, I'm pregnant.
Oh my God, I forgot about that part.
The only thing that scares me is you might love him more than you love me.
I'm scared of being attacked by a giant alligator. I have rational fears, Danny. I have to say, Evelyn really pisses me off as a character. She doesn't show nearly any signs of emotional conflict. She just goes right back to Danny when the guy who gave her the most romantic 4 weeks and 2 days of her life has come back for her. And there's no sequences to outline that she has any real emotional struggles.
I need you for a mission I've been ordered to put together. You know what top secret is?
Oh, this mission being top secret works out perfectly for a Michael Bay film, because then he doesn't have to explain to audiences what is actually going on. He can just use the element of surprise again. But realistically, after watching this film, I still don't know what the fuck the mission they're doing is. But it's okay, because here's a distracting, awesome slow-motion walking shot.
Max power!
He's the man whose name you'd love to touch, but you mustn't touch.
And we're going to Tokyo. And we're gonna bomb it.
Man, these guys really love genocide.
Victory cigars! Yeah, victory!
Victory cigars, that's a new one. Gotta be very easy to smoke those when you're burning up in a crashed plane, dickhead.
You know, Jack, we may lose this battle, but we're gonna win this war. You know how I know?
Cause it's a Michael Bay film?
Let them tell that to General MacArthur and his men.
Please don't. I had to watch 4 films on MacArthur when I made Inchon. He is not an interesting character. They launch and start bombing Japan. I don't know what they're bombing or how this falls into the bigger picture of things. And Pearl Harbor has no interest in telling me. As a kid, I honestly thought this was the bombing of Hiroshima because I didn't know any better. Evelyn manages to manipulate her way into being in a position where she gets real-time updates on the attack.
Pretend to type whatever information we pass you.
Or, you know, actually do some typing, you know, help these people out, do some fucking work. It's not that hard to type shit. After a short period of bombing, our pilots are left flying without any guidance and have to make it to China.
Get into the clouds, Danny, right now! Get up in that suit!
Does anyone actually call clouds soup? Is that a thing? First it seems like they won't, but then they do. But then they crash land in territory full of Japanese, which allows for one final action scene. And wouldn't you know it, Danny gets shot. and he actually dies. But again, Evelyn doesn't want to show any emotion beyond grabbing his jacket in slow motion.
Japan realized for the first time that they could lose and began to pull back. America realized that she would win and surged forward.
America is she, but Japan is they. They're very oddly specific when it comes to assuming the pronouns of these countries. And then the film ends with Rafe back with his ex-girlfriend, but raising her bastard child. The end. So now that we're finally concluded, is Pearl Harbor a good film? Well, 15-year-old me is going to hate myself for saying this, but yes. Pearl Harbor is a good film if you're a fan of Michael Bay, but if you approach it objectively, there is obviously a lot wrong with it. I can look past the cheesy sentimentality and melodramatic love story because although it's boring, tedious, and unnecessary, it's also hilarious because it tries so hard and comes across as so pathetic. It's just laughable, and typically I can't stand obligatory love stories in films, yet this one is just so pathetic that it brings in a lot of laughter to the first 80 minutes of the film. Though it does annoy me that we're constantly teased on when Pearl Harbor will get attacked amid all this. Then there's the middle section, which is amazing, but it's the third hour which I feel is honestly the weakest. Like I said, audiences won't know what the American strike actually is unless they've been previously educated on the history of Pearl Harbor. And any historical war film that doesn't make audiences understand the context of its story has failed in one of its key duties. I ended up doing some research on this attack. This turned out to be the Doolittle Raid. It was a very small scale attack which was meant to boost morale in America and prove that the Japanese mainland could be attacked. It also sparked the Battle of Midway, which led to a historical defeat for the Japanese. I shouldn't have to research that, but explaining things is not Michael Bay's strong suit. He couldn't even explain to Ben Affleck why in the film Armageddon, NASA would train an inexperienced mining crew to go into outer space instead of just training astronauts how to drill.
I asked Michael why it was easier to train oil drillers to become astronauts than it was to train astronauts to become oil drillers, and he told me to shut the fuck up. So that was the end of that talk.
But the main problem with the film's depiction of the Doolittle Raid is that it's doomed from the start. After the attack scene blows your mind, anything after that is destined to be anticlimactic. There's no coming back from that attack because it's such an intense experience. So even if the Doolittle Raid was depicted better than it was, it still wouldn't have any major emotional impact. But also, the whole act could have been done better if we saw the Japanese react to the attack. Their tactics in the bombing of Pearl Harbor played a prominent role in the first half of the film, but then they get reduced to background characters when they're attacked. I didn't expect the film to be sympathetic to them at all because of Michael Bay's jingoistic attitude. But if we could at least see some military officials reacting to the attack so we can gain an understanding of how Japanese morale was impacted, it would have been a lot more powerful. Without that, the scene is soulless. The third act of Pearl Harbor isn't pretentious enough to be funny, it's just really slow, it doesn't explain what's happening, and it's incredibly anticlimactic. All this being said, Pearl Harbor succeeds entirely on the basis of its action. If you know Michael Bay enough to look past inconsistent acting and juvenile writing, you know the man makes great action. And honestly, it's some of the most spectacular action I've ever seen in a movie. The thing I really admire is the attention to detail. Michael Bay movies always utilize spectacular widescreen cinematography, which always captures the large-scale ambitions of the story and builds intense atmosphere by giving audiences a powerful range of perspective from different shots. And the way he seamlessly combines actual live-action aviation footage with state-of-the-art visual effects, which still hold up to this day, mind you, makes for a battle which feels as authentic as it is intense. The extended battle scene in Pearl Harbor is so gripping, so invigorating, that it holds you so intensively in the moment and makes you forget that you just sat through 80 minutes of this.
Don't take my wings.
I can fault almost nothing with the attack scene in Pearl Harbor, even if there are some moments that are so absurd that you would expect Randy Quaid to fly in and save everyone.
Oh, boys! I'm back!
This scene is truly one of the most unforgettable cinematic experiences I've ever seen in a movie, and the great production values, scenery, costumes, and cinematography remains even outside of this scene. The soundtrack is beautiful as well, and it really helps to make every scene atmospheric. If you did a road cut of Pearl Harbor and cut the first hour and 22 minutes of the film, you'd actually have a much better movie. It'd have a lot less backgrounding, but since that backgrounding is pretentious, extended romantic drama, it'd be a lot better without that. Realistically, Pearl Harbor is basically a cross between the films Heaven's Gate and Top Gun. Heaven's Gate is a visually stunning but overlong and overblown story about the Johnson County War, which dragged on with a tedious love story, though it did have a pretty exciting battle scene. Top Gun was a cheesy remake of An Officer and a Gentleman, which placed some random aviation footage sporadically against the backdrop of a really shitty love story. Pearl Harbor triumphs both of these films because its action is phenomenally better than both, and rather than just having overblown periods of boring dialogue like the first two films, Pearl Harbor at least has the chance of making audiences laugh at its sheer ridiculousness. But I do have to make a point that I only consider Pearl Harbor good after a second viewing. The first time, I got really caught off guard by the Titanic-like approach to the storytelling and the ostentatious love story, but on second viewing, I went in with the expectation of having a good time with a good bad movie, and I definitely got that. And the action was so much more phenomenal than I remember, but the Doolittle Raid was still a low point for the film. As a final note, I want to talk about the actors in the film. There are a handful of good performances, such as Cuba Gooding Jr., who needed a bigger part. Yes, that was a Team America reference. Alec Baldwin was good, and Dan Aykroyd does a very solid job in a bit dramatic part. Jon Voight also does a good job in embodying the classical American president president archetype. Even a young Michael Shannon who plays a lovable idiot. And of course Tom Sizemore as a Columbine High School student. Oddly enough, the best actors in the film though are the Japanese cast, largely because they're led by the tenacious acting charisma of Academy Award nominee Mako. When it comes to the three lead actors, it's hard to say. Josh Hartnett is a generic flyboy. He's cute and likable, but not particularly transcendent. Kate Beckinsale is a pretty face, but she plays a terribly underdeveloped character and only shows a handful of characteristics in the role, though this is mainly because of the script. With Ben Affleck, it's honestly hard to say. 20 years ago, he was the pretty boy all over the media, so people would have judged him differently. But now he's actually an accomplished film director who has moved back to playing some more challenging characters and has definitely proven himself. I lost so much respect for Ben Affleck as an actor when I first watched Pearl Harbor, but looking at it again now, I can't say the same thing. He plays the role as a very melodramatic pretty boy, but it's all the film will allow him to do. He can be really arrogant and cocky at times, but he's also kind of adorable at others. He's there to appeal to the girls, not to win an Oscar, and objectively, it's one of his lesser roles, but it's not without his charms. Ultimately, Pearl Harbor gets 6 suicidal flyboys out of 10. It has a laughably terrible first act, a very powerful action center, and then a pretty disappointing conclusion. But the laughter and incredible action scenes synonymous with Michael Bay should be enough to carry you if you're already converted by his films. That's if you can handle the 3-hour runtime. And that does it for today's episode of Delightfully Devilish, you guys. If there's any ideas for movies you want me to discuss on this show, please leave them in the comment section below. If you want to see more episodes, please hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, until next time, I've been your host, Jukebox Harry. Peace.